1977, George Lucas formed a legacy.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force.
Inspired by mythology, his saga has become a passion for many.
Feel the Force around you.
His legend has become our story.
It's true. All lives.
One of resistance.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
Rebellion.
Rebellion is built on hope.
And redemption.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
This is Star Wars Reactions.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Well, hello world. Welcome to Star Wars Reactions. We are back for our 101st episode of this show, and it's going to be a great one. We're going to have lots of fun. We will be discussing the Bad Batch episode, Solitary Clone, and it's going to be great. It's going to be fun. It was a great episode, so let's not waste any time. My name, of course, is Aaron Harris. And joining me is not my pal, David Motters. Unfortunately, he is still out with family issues, so we wish him the best. We're praying for them and his family. But joining me, filling David's extra large shoes, is the wonderful, wonderful friend of ours. He is the encyclopedia of all trading card knowledge, the host of the Rebel Base Card.
Hey.
The Greg McLaughlin. Greg, welcome back, I should say.
Thank you, and thank you so much. Yes, there's no way I could fill David's shoes because I'm like an 8.5, so I've got really tiny feet, so there's no way I'm filling his shoes. So,
well, you could fill mine.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wear the same size, so you could fill mine if I ever went out. Oh, well, I appreciate you jumping in and helping us out this week. We got a great episode to discuss with the Solitary Clone. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. Solitary Clone, of course, which was released exclusively on Disney Plus, January 11th of 2023, was written by Amanda Rose Munoz and directed by Saul Ruiz. Synopsis of this episode in a nutshell: Crosshair and the long missing but now returned to the spotlight Commander Cody are dispatched to rescue the Imperial Governor Groton and his guards from the people of Desix, who want to stay an independent planet led by the governor Tawny Ames. So, of course, we always kick everything off with our initial reactions, so let's go right into it. I loved this episode. Coming off the heels of the premiere where we did not see Crosshair at all, to have a complete Crosshair-centric episode was perfect. I loved the fact that we got Cody back, because it was always a question of what happened to him after 66. And we got to see Cody still just trooping away. And to see the journey that he makes through this episode, it was fabulous. To me, the lighting and the music in this episode really set it apart, because it told the story in and of itself with the lighting and the music. It was just perfect. Again, this is just me just gushing because everybody knows how much I love Kevin Kiner. Kevin Kiner is, there's a pecking order. There's John Williams, Kevin Kiner, everybody else. So it's just how it is. I love the man. He's fabulous score he did for this this episode. So, I mean, by far, this has been not only been my favorite of the season, but I'd probably say have to be probably one of my favorites for the series so far. So,
wow.
Loved it. What were your initial thoughts when you first saw this episode, Greg?
I think it goes back to, what we've been kind of talking about, Greg Cass and I, is the animation. If you go back and you guys go back to, Clone Wars and Rebels and so forth, and seeing how much that animation has progressed. I mean, they really, you really see an amazing, display here when they're trying to show us what Desix looks like. And it kind of reminds me almost of that episode of the Mandalorian with Ahsoka on that planet where it's, it's pretty much desolated, but you get a real feel for it. The environment really kind of sucks you in. And I know that in listening to a recent Fantatrax podcast where they did a roundtable and they were talking to Kevin Kiner about, and he kind of pointed out, episode 3, he really liked. So I think we were kind of ready for it. But yes, I think just given the fact that this series is as long as it is, allows you to have this great entrance by Crosshair and Cody. I mean, you get them both in the same episode. Cody looks different, but right away you can tell something's not quite right with him. I mean, aside from the coloring, but just his attitude towards it. And so you're really, we think that we're going to have this big thing between Crosshair and Rampart, and it doesn't happen. You get this like, oh, hey, by the way, somebody else is going to do this. I feel bad because, Crosshair doesn't get a breakfast. Someone who does like a breakfast shtick, he didn't get breakfast twice. But I think you get sucked in with so much. And then, if you like action, this is your bag. You've got clones, you got stormtroopers, you get battle droids. I mean, you get this whole kind of Clone Wars episode. So what a great, kind of a throwback to kind of get you into the present. What a great episode it was. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, Crosshair, everybody always wondered why Crosshair was always so cross. It's probably because he never gets his coffee in the morning.
Never gets his coffee.
Rampart keeps interrupting him, but all right. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at a few talking points from this episode.
Sure.
One of the things I liked about this episode is we get to see how the Empire is taking over planets of the Separatist Confederation. Because at the end of the Clone Wars, yes, the war was over, but there were still all the Separatist planets were still there. They still had their armies. I mean, yes, droids got shutdown orders, but as we saw in Rebels, in the last battle, not all the droids were shut down. Then we got here where they were not shut down. They were got all these droids here, not just the B1s. You have the super battle droids. You have the destroyer droids. You have the commando droids. Droidicas, yeah. And you have all these droids there. So you have you obviously there has to be more to the conflict post Order 66. And I loved how this showed us how that kind of occurred on these planets. They gave them an option to join, then they just kind of forced their way in. And I thought that was a unique way to show us this storyline and answer some questions that people have about what happened after the Clone Wars. What were your thoughts on how the Imperials took over Desix?
I'm really glad you asked me that, because I've been kind of scratching my head, especially after episode 2, where we clearly saw that they punished Serrano, Dooku's former planet, home planet, and also a Separatist planet. So I was incredibly surprised, because I was like, really? We're going to go through just a mission and not just planetary bombard these guys? Because I'm like, okay, we like Max Middleton as the voice of Governor Groton, but I don't think the Empire could have cared less about Groton. But they did send, I think it's interesting that you see at the end, you see more stormtroopers, but they decided to pick the clones for this. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that, they went, that they were this patient, because I'm like, why couldn't you have just, bombed them unless, it wasn't like it didn't look like there were lush, fields and things like that. It looked like a pretty rough planet, kind of remind me of like the Mandalorian home planet. Yeah. But I'm surprised they gave them that quarter, but you're right. It is a little early. They're just trying to feel in things out, but they didn't waste any time. They were like, all right, go and get him. If not, then, they'll send in the cavalry or the folks that they're really, it's amazing. They really worry about losing stormtroopers, but they have no qualms about churning through clones. But yeah, I was a little surprised, but hey, it got us a great caper, as it were.
Oh, it certainly did. And to piggyback off what you said, with Serrano, obviously they just carpet bombed the place, just like they did on Camino. They just wiped planetary bombardment from orbit, and we know, of course, the Empire has the capability to do that. But that's not always, you can't just go in and wipe out the population on every planet that doesn't want to join you.
True.
Or else you have nobody to rule. Like, who's the emperor going to rule at that point? Besides, you need the labor to strip mine the planet. So you want to try to take it peacefully. And I mean, I think really the carpet bomb, the bombardment of Serrano is basically just a message to the rest of the Separatist alliance that, hey, this is what's coming if you don't act up, and of course do it on Dooku's planet, who is the head. So, but yeah, I love they included the takeover there. Let's talk about Cody. Let's talk about Commander Cody. I tell you, Commander Cody was somebody, of course, we first were introduced to him in Revenge of the Sith. And then, of course, when he, of course, was under the command of Obi-Wan Kenobi, then, of course, he takes Kenobi out, or so he thinks. And yeah, nobody. That's the first time you saw clone troopers shooting like stormtroopers. They missed their target. But, Carabast missed him. Look out below. Anyway, but we see him there. Then, of course, we really got to see and know the character throughout the Clone Wars. We got to see him team up with Rex and on solo missions. We got to see him under the command of Kenobi, and just see him completely fleshed out more in Clone Wars. And now we get to see him here. Now, of course, there's the obvious visual differences in his uniform. They've gotten rid of the yellow, and it's now what used to be yellow is now almost a gray, a darker gray, and you could tell they're uniforming the look of the troops at that point. And that was obviously a sign right there when you see Cody. But Cody, when we first meet him, he takes his helmet off. He's talking to Crosshair. We find out he specifically requested Crosshair, and he's walking the line of, good soldiers follow orders. And he even says that to Crosshair. And he's talking to what he considers a friend, an old friend at that point. And he doesn't have the hard line stance that Crosshair has, but you could tell he's walking the line. There's not you don't get a sense of waver in his questioning of the Empire at that moment. That ends up coming later. But I got to get your thoughts, Greg. When you first saw Cody walk into the screen, you heard the voice, you see him walk in, take that helmet off. How did you feel when you finally saw Commander Cody back on the screen again?
I think it kind of goes back to, earlier this week I had to work from home part of a day, and I, was firing up Revenge of the Sith in the background. And it's interesting because Cody's only one of 2 clones that were ever named in the actual films, Oddball being the other one in the beginning. And so you have that history. And of course, you were going to point out, I'm glad, and this is something I'd probably have my cohort Greg Cass talk to me about, is that, being a little more versed in Clone Wars, I've seen a good chunk of it. But yeah, I think it's Clone Wars, just kind of like Rex, where people get a better feel for him and get more of an attachment too. And so it's nice because, yes, although at the end of Revenge of the Sith, we don't really see what happens to Cody, I do like the fact when we get in that he, obviously is a commander, right? Now, all the clones are, created equal, but that's where they kind of, it kind of stops, where he's obviously a little more top down. And so he's got a little better perspective than your average clone. And you can kind of tell that right away. And it does sort of still play into what we're trying to figure out, which we haven't figured out yet, is that, did these inhibitor chips wane over time? Were they kind of not maybe fleshed out enough to where over time that some of the stuff just doesn't, cross and connect. And so it gets them to start thinking on their own. And I really like how, I think it ties back even into the previous episode where Wilco, I was talking to Greg about Wilco, like he kind of stoops by that clone trooper. And so you are seeing this humanity that they lovingly put into these clones, and you can see growth, even though like, if you've got the audio down and you're just watching it, just look like, well, that clone looks like that clone looks like that clone.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's saying I specifically requested you and things like that, it's a great setup. And then at the end, you're left wondering, where does he go? Someone of his, he's a pretty high up, in at least the clone army.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what happens? And now you're like left going, what happens next? I feel like I'm talking to my own show. But I think the more that they kind of pluck from Clone Wars, which plucks from the prequels, it just really, I go back now and I watch the prequels, I think, more because of all this kind of tie back, because now you're seeing this history and you can tie it back to a movie where you just find out going, oh, hey, there's Commander Cody and all this. And it's not just, we're not just seeing the prequels as a bunch of, memes, as it were. And now you're seeing where these pieces are. And it's really nice where they tied it back through, something that happened in 2005 to present day. And so I'm just kind of excited what happens to him. Does he survive? Who knows? But at the very least, he's in play, just like Rex is. We know Rex has a longer history. But now it's like, what happened? Now you're thinking, along with, how do we get in Crosshair back? How do we do on all this? Hey, what's happening to Cody? And I think that makes a nice little extra wrinkle in this series.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that in, because that was where I was going next, was through the events of the episode, we see that change in Cody, where he's beginning to question the methods and what's going on with the Empire, especially after Groton orders the execution of Governor Tawny Ames, and is just adamant that he kill her. And of course, Crosshair takes the shot before Cody. You can see Cody debating, what do I do? And because it's probably the first time he's been put in this position by anybody since the Empire took over. So he's finally realized, he knows other troopers have gone AWOL. He knows Clone Force 99 is gone AWOL. He knows people are out there questioning, but he's never questioned until he was put in that position. And we see and that's where I love the animation in this episode. You see, he doesn't say a word, but you see the turmoil in his face. He is being torn in half at that moment. Good soldiers follow orders. This is not a good order. You could see the ethical debate, the morality just wrestling inside of him. And it was just so well put together. And then when he gets back, after it's all done and they get back to Coruscant, which we were on Coruscant in this episode. Incredible to see that. But we get back to Coruscant, and then he has that conversation with Crosshair, and he's talking about, are we doing the right thing here? and what makes us different between the droids? We got a conscience, we understand our orders, we have a conscience. And he goes, but we also have to live with our decisions. And it just gets you right there as he walks off. And you at that moment, as soon as he said that and walked off, I knew he was going to go AWOL. I knew he was gone. And it was just such a potent experience scene at that point, because we then follow Crosshair's journey. We see Crosshair go right back to the same old. He wakes up in the morning, he goes to breakfast, he gets summoned by Rampart. It's exactly how the series opened. He wakes up, he eats breakfast, he gets summoned by Rampart. So he sits by himself. Nobody wants to sit with him. He's obviously, and which is why they call it the solitary clone. And the way, and this, I'm about to hit you with the 2-part question, so prepare yourself. The way he was acting at the end of this episode, Crosshair was acting at the end of this episode, when he wakes up, the looks on his face, when he's sitting down eating breakfast, the looks on his face, you can begin to see that same type of questioning in Crosshair that you saw in Rex. It reminded me a lot of Callus after he was rescued by the Empire after being stranded with Zeb. He got that same solidarity. Nobody's recognized. Oh, he bumps into Admiral Constantine, and he's like, "Oh, Callus, you're back," and just walks off.
Right.
And he ends up sitting alone in his cabin, limping to his cabin, and just sits there by himself. It's the same thing with Crosshair. So I want your thoughts and hear what you think about one, Cody's journey through this episode, where he finally comes to grips and realizes he's on the wrong side and leaves, and the effects that has had on Crosshair, and how the wheels have started turning in his head.
It's interesting that we can kind of trace back to the season 1 finale, of course, when Crosshair, and now we find out he was pretty much on that platform for about 32 rotations, or probably 30, about a month. So he had a long time to think about that. And I do like the fact that some of those initial seeds, and you like having that discussion between the rest of the Bad Batch and Crosshair. And even during this, right? I mean, if I went a couple more days without breakfast, who knows what I would do. But I would say that I like that these seeds have been planted, because at some point you got to figure, are we going to have a repeat of last season's kind of thread where Crosshair hunts them down, or at some point is Crosshair going to turn, or just going to basically just go, you know what, I'm kind of done. I don't think his bank of good soldiers follow orders is unending. And I do think that although he still has enough in that cup, that cup is starting to diminish a bit. And the fact that this is not just a clone leaving, this is Commander Cody leaving. And so this is sort of like when you can tell your kid something, and you and your spouse can tell your kid something, but when someone else tells them something, they buy in. You go, okay, all right. Hunter can talk as today as long as he's not going to, but I think that Cody was in such a great place, that they put him in such a great place to have sort of a little bit of influence on it, even if this doesn't pay off yet. I do think, and once again, I go back to how many episodes we have. We have 16, as all of us who are trying to record stuff going, great, 16 episodes. I like this 8 and 10 episode business, but hey, at least, you're going to have a chance to kind of get these through, and it might be subtle. You might miss it. Like I said, Crosshair doesn't appear in the first 2 episodes. He appears in this. And so it is kind of nice. And I think you get a lot of thinking, right? You get a lot of him kind of waking up. And I love that Agent Callus callback, because I think it kind of went down the same way. Although, you had Zeb kind of helping out there. I'm liking this, because I'd like Crosshair a little more filled out. And I really liked him as not necessarily, I like him as a foil for Hunter, but I'd love him as a partner for Hunter in future seasons. That could totally be 10 to 12 episodes. Let's just say going forward.
Absolutely. But one thing I like about this too, which I didn't say earlier, is I think this sets up the journey we're going to have for Crosshair to get his redemption and rejoin his brothers that he's served with his entire life. So I think this is the trigger that starts the journey. That the seeds of doubt are there, and at some point he's going to reach that line where the decision's going to have to be made. And I think this just got the ball rolling.
Exactly. And he can be a good soldier in another conflict as well. He's got the skills, but it's like the Empire is just, it's amazing now going back to Rampart. And I'm sure we could talk a little more about it, where, once again, we're thinking they're going to have this discussion, but, Rampart pretty much dismisses him. I'm almost surprised that he's even calling him to tell him, oh, great, you're here, blah. But of course, that I can see, overarching story reasons why you want to see it. But, at this point, after that last encounter, Rampart didn't necessarily look up from that data pad. He was continuing on. I thought maybe he'd give him a little bit of a look that would kind of give us a little bit of indication, but all things is he's keeping a tight lip. He doesn't care. And Crosshair is just whatever until you're used up. You're a bag of chips, and when you're done, you're done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I still want to keep going on this, because there's more I want to talk about. But before we do, we're going to take a real quick break, and we'll be back to talk some more about Crosshair and Cody. Hold on, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're here, Star Wars Reactions. I'm Aaron, here with Greg from Rebel Base Card, and we're talking The Solitary Clone. And before we took a break, we were talking about the influence Crosshair and Cody had on Crosshair, and his defection and everything. And it's one thing that I noticed, especially at the end of this. We talked about, I mentioned how Crosshair's kind of having those thoughts, as you could tell his attitude has somewhat changed there at the end when he has that wake up, and then when he's sitting at breakfast, he's got just the expression on his face, the way it's animated, is different. He's still got that hard, mean look, but there's almost a little bit of confusion mixed in there at this point. And then when he gets called to Rampart's office, he walks in, he gets his next mission, tells him to report to this clone, and Crosshair's like, well, what about Cody? And Rampart's like, Cody? He's like, CT-2224. He's like, oh, well, he went AWOL. It's like, clone loyalty isn't not what it was made out to be. So not only did you tell him that the guy he just went on a mission with, his friend, deserted, you just told him he wasn't loyal and sent him away on another mission. So, and I loved how it ended with him walking out of the office, walking down the hall with just what would have felt like that stationary camera shot. And he just kind of walks in and with plate and just goes right into his breastplate, and the credits start. Fabulous shot, by the way. I loved how they did that. But what are your thoughts on Rampart? Just the way he broke the news, just so nonchalant. Oh, he went AWOL.
It does go back to, when he comes in last season, you're sort of like, you kind of roll your eyes for a moment. And it's kind of the same thing with, was it Governor Price from Rebels, where it's like, everybody, there's Thrawn and then there's everybody else, right?
Yep.
So it's sort of like, all right, how are they going to do this? And then, you really see him when he pulls the blaster on Wilco. He's like, all right, this guy's for real, and they're really setting up as a baddie. And again, I'm sitting there going, I'm kind of expecting, like, how are they gonna handle this? And it's just he just kind of doesn't even bat an eyelash. But I also, in the thinking, what you're saying is that, he doesn't call the clones by their names. He'll call them by their call signatures, and which is just definite dehumanizing. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of amazing. It just like sloughs it off. And at the end, you just see more and more of those, Macquarie style stormtroopers that are showing up. They just keep showing up more and more. And I really thought that was a great, just like we saw in Andor, right? Yep. Where you saw one ship made a big difference. So by the time that you saw a bunch of them, it really had a bigger impact. That had a huge impact, when you saw there's just more and more, and you can just see this change where it's like, but it's also interesting where, did you notice, like, the fellow clones, right? Both times you sit down, the clones just kind of pick up and move somewhere else. Yep. They want to have nothing to do with him, which is super interesting. But that goes back to when the Bad Batch, was all together. So it's like, Crosshair's getting it from all sides. And I think it's just got to chew on a little bit. But I'll be curious what Rampart's next move is. I'm certain, you don't necessarily, in some cases, want to kind of fall into like where we see with Sid, right? Is it going to be the mission of the week? But on the other side, But you definitely, he's going to be a baddie, and I'm starting to wonder, like, boy, how are they going to play it? Is he making the season? Is he going to be, who's going to take him out?
Yeah.
Does Crosshair take him out? I don't know. But once, I'll save that question for my co-host, Greg Cass.
Lips are sealed. But it's unique, and Rampart has been, Rampart we were introduced to last season, and the way he was made out, he was going to be the big baddie. He's the big Imperial Admiral, the big baddie, but he just kind of fizzled throughout the season. He really just wasn't there. So then we start this season, and of course there's Rampart right off the bat, and you're like, okay, this dude's back. And then, of course, with one shot there at the end, killing Wilco, you're like, okay,
it's for reals.
This is getting real. And then we see him in this episode just dishing those orders. He's got it almost feels like they're trying to improve his stature as the baddie. And I'm glad they're finally doing that, because, I'm a big Rebels fan, but there's just something about a good bad guy. And
exactly,
every show needs to have that good bad guy for the good guys to go up against,
Mm-hmm.
And Rebels did a fantastic job bringing in Thrawn, who was by far probably my favorite Imperial of all time, going all the way back to the original trilogy written by Timothy Zahn. Heir to the Empire and them. I loved Thrawn in those books. So I've been a Thrawn fan for years. So when they brought him in, I was like, oh. But then, of course, now we got Rampart, and we're starting to see him grow at this point. And I like, between Rampart's actions in the last episode, his coldness in this episode, and even the behavior of Governor Groton, we're seeing the just direct, downright evilness of the Empire.
Exactly.
And it's made these episodes compelling at that point. So, all right, a couple more talk points I want to hit on before we start wrapping up here. Let's talk about this just being a giant Clone Wars episode. I mean, we have Cody and clones versus Separatist battle droids. It doesn't get much more of a Clone Wars episode than this. The only thing missing was Kenobi leading the way. I mean, this was just such a fun episode with the way they were fighting the droids. We had droid poppers coming back into play again, which it was fun to see those. And it didn't feel like the Bad Batch. It felt like the Clone Wars to me.
Well, and a good point, because I had to kind of do a little IMDb dive on this, because I was looking at some of the names, and you're not wrong. You have Matthew Wood. He's the voice of those battle droids. But guess what? Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, General Grievous's voice. Sound editor for Lucasfilm.
Yep.
He'd also done Tambor and Poggle and so forth. So you're seeing, like, let's bring the band back together and get some great voice work in there. And it's funny, because you look back now and you see the battle droids go, and they're the way they talk and their conversation style, and you're just like, oh yeah. And of course, over the years, like when I first saw it, you're like, oh, that's a little weird for them to say. And then after a while, you're like, you know what, that's just them. And it's just fun. But seeing that, as a matter of fact, the list of the voices in here, now for me, I've been sitting on this, but Governor Ames in this, that's Tasia Valenza, who's Vanessa Dosa from Resistance, and their kids is your Resistance callback in this episode. You're welcome. One of my favorite characters from Resistance. But so I love the voices in that. So Shelby Young as a tactical droid.
Yep.
I think she was the voice. She's done a lot of voice work, but I think she did young Leia in I forget which one it was. So I love the voices they're bringing back in, and the fact that they can go to a lot of these folks, and like you keep saying, those elements, those pieces of the Clone Wars are out there, just ready to be picked up, these puzzle pieces that can be put together, and it satisfies an audience that, clearly loves, the Clone Wars stories. They love the Clone Wars animation style, and you really see how the Bad Batch is just this kind of, they're just these witnesses to everything that's happening in a period that we just really wanted to know a whole lot about. And then you can kind of tie that into, future things where we could, they're just gluing this story together, and it's just so fun. And yeah, I mean, who doesn't want a little extra Clone Wars, sprinkled into their Bad Batch or into their Star Wars?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad they did, because, this episode was, if you sit down and look at this episode, this was a very dark episode. There's a lot of darkness in this episode. And bringing those Clone Wars elements in, especially with the battle droids, you got that comedic element to lighten the mood, so it wasn't such a heavy episode. They shoot down the shuttle, they open the door to make sure everybody's dead, and the one droid is like, "This is bad," and the other droid behind him points and goes, "Bad for them." It's like, oh my god, nothing has changed with these guys.
That's so great.
It was priceless, and which brings me into the final point I want to talk about tonight, is the effect that the animation and the lighting and the music had on this episode. Because you can have the best voice actors in the world, and they have probably the most talented voice actor there is today alive, doing 90% of the voices in this episode. in D. Bradley Baker. The man is, I've met the man. He's a marvel to see. Him and James Arnold Taylor, they are a marvel to see them just go back and forth the way they do. It just, and if you haven't seen it, I'll have to find it and post it, but there's a video that shows D. Bradley Baker, and he's at a convention. He's basically doing a script reading from the Bad Batch with a couple other voice actors, and he is jumping from Hunter to Wrecker to Tech, just back and forth. I believe the voice of Omega was there, so she was doing Omega, but I mean, he just sat there and just seamlessly, without a pause, without hesitation, was just jumping voice to voice to voice. It was incredible. So you have the talent there for the voices, so that's covered. But the way they're drawing these episodes, the way they're animating, like I said, without saying a word, you could see the conflict animated in Cody's face. You can see the difference in Crosshair and the beginning of the thoughts, the wheel starting to turn from the beginning of the episode to the end of the episode, doing the exact same things, but there's a different swagger about him at that point. You could tell there's something different about him at that point. So those type of animations, and then just how the lighting, how dark it is when at the beginning, when he first talks to Rampart, there's just a little strip of light across his chest and the bottom of his face. At the end, that light, I don't know if you noticed, that light extended further up his face. Because there was that change in him, and now you're seeing that change. That light is starting to drift up. So the symbolism in the lighting, and it was just so intense in this episode. And then you partner that with just an incredible score by Kevin Kiner, and I could see this. I could see this episode winning an Emmy.
And you're also, it's like those folks who had, faith that they would come back to the Clone Wars after it's sort of like it's cut off a little early. Those folks who spent a lot of nights on their knees, like asking whoever, praying to whoever, it's like, please bring back Clone Wars, please save Clone Wars. They're getting those prayers and thoughts and well wishes, returned in spades, especially, like with the seventh, season of Clone Wars, and then into Bad Batch, and we get some of these callbacks to where it's like you're seeing now everybody knows how to do this. We've gotten, there's better faster, more efficient ways to get so much more, from the animation. They look so much better. They sound so much better, right? Everybody's and then you got these voices that are coming back. And I really recommend folks, listen to these. I know at least on the Fantatrax ones, but I know that, Sky Talkers and Full of Sith, and Father and Son Galaxy, they were in on that roundtable that had D. Bradley Baker, that had Kevin Kiner, that had Michelle Ang. I recommend, I was listening to it just on the way home because Fantatrax just released it. Listen to these episodes that talk to these folks in the roundtable, and they are so passionate about it. They are so happy. They are so fulfilled about it. And the D. Bradley Baker section was amazing, and he was going into voices. And then he was even doing Crosshair for one of the Father and Son Galaxy, and doing this great Crosshair. When I reached out, I was like, please let me borrow that clip, because he's like, that's an interesting question. I'm like, I want that. But they could go back, and then they're asking Michelle about and she just starts talking. I'm like, oh my God, that's Omega. That's like kind of how she sounds anyway. Yeah. But they're so excited. Everybody's just really pumped, and you're just seeing folks it's like an all-star game, right? This is like an all-star animation game where everybody's out, and you're just seeing all the pros out there, and they're just doing great stuff. And we're just sitting back here going, all we have to do is watch and enjoy. That's all our job is. And it's just, they make it so easy.
Oh, they certainly do. They certainly do. And I said this last week, I'm going to say it again this week. It is so awesome to be a Star Wars fan today, because we have so much stuff being given to us. Like it or love it, there's something you're going to find that you're going to love. So you don't have to love everything, but my God, I am loving this Bad Batch. And I think I said this back when David and I recorded our reviews of Tales of the Jedi. But there's just something. I mean, I've loved all the shows that have come out. Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, Andor. They've all been really good. But there's just something about Star Wars animation and its storytelling that is unmatched across the board. There's nothing, nobody can touch it, period. I know Resistance wasn't a huge success, but the storytelling, even in Resistance, was just so far beyond. It's just the animation of Star Wars is they've mastered it. All hell Filoni for president. Let's get her done.
And you're preaching the choir on Resistance, man. We could do it. We could do a whole separate show on how much I love that, and how it got, how it took some risks. It had some bumps, but at the end it was going on all cylinders. And I want them to kind of keep doing that. I want them to keep pushing the envelope. The Visions, which I think we're getting another season of Visions. Push that envelope, see what happens. And we're, like I said, we just have to kind of sit back and enjoy the ride. And not everything's going to hit with everybody. Yeah. But especially when you're doing callbacks in Clone Wars, which a lot of folks that kind of that's their Star Wars. They were kids, and then they became adults, and now they're having the voices in this hobby, or in this fandom, and they're just loving it. And it's kind of fun. And like I said, we're just seeing it progress so much that I can't wait to see what's next.
Excellent. Well, anything else you want to hit on for Solitary Clone before we go into our final thoughts?
I think we've pretty much put it together. It went in that order. I loved going back through and looking at the voices. Sometimes when we're doing our show, I kind of hold off on trying to read too much about it until I kind of we get through our show. Then I can kind of go back, and then you see all these deep dives and YouTube videos and Substacks and all this kind of fun. But it was really nice to get these pleasant surprises, because a lot of times those credits go by so fast. Or we get through our viewing and we got to go to work, and so you're like, So it's nice to kind of go back and kind of digest, and that's why normally I'm listening to you guys. I'm listening to other Star Wars podcasts break it down, because I'm like, I need to know what's going on, and a lot of folks have that canon they can just call up like that. I have to have Greg help me out with that all the time.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, I understand. That's why I have David. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh, what's his name? And David's like, bup, bup, bup. I'm like, yep, that's it. I mean, he what I don't know, he knows. What he knows, what he doesn't know, I know. So
and you had
always
Jason
nice to have
Fry last week. So, I mean,
I know.
that was a heavy hitter you had. So that, no slouch there. It's like, yeah, you pulled some nice strings to get him.
Yeah, we love Jason Fry. He's a good friend. We've enjoyed having him on the show the few times we've had him on. He actually holds the record. Like I told him last week, he holds the record for the most guest spots on the show. So
I got a lot of work to do.
You got some. You'll get you there. You never know. We'll get you there. But yeah, well, let's go ahead and jump into our final thoughts here.
Sure.
And I'll go ahead and give you the floor. Let you go first. What were your final thoughts on Solitary Clone?
I was kind of interested because one of my questions would be, don't tell Greg. Who was the Solitary Clone? Was it Cody or was it Crosshair? And I think you've kind of convinced me now it's more Crosshair. But when I kind of look at this, I love how it's positioned because we had those first two ones. The first two episodes set the table. This kind of sets the table a bit for Crosshair. Mm-hmm. So I think that this puts us in a position to where, all right, we're 3 episodes and we're getting ready to go 4. That's almost a quarter of the way through the season. Where is this going to take us? And I still have questions. I mean, we do have some show titles, but I'm kind of curious where it goes. But they set the bar pretty high with this one. And from the one I'm getting from the the producers, when you hear these roundtables, they're real excited for us to see it. Hats off to all the folks that got those screeners. 14 episodes they sent in screeners. I'm like, wow, they pretty much sent everything except the ending
finale. Yeah,
I know. So I'm just excited, and the vibes I'm getting from people, it's cool. So I can't wait to see what's next. But I think it's going to be hold your seat, folks.
Oh, absolutely. It will be. And it will be hold your seat because episode 4, which comes out next week, is entitled Faster.
Faster, more intense.
Faster, more intense, faster.
Faster, more Carabas. That's what it is.
There it is. Oh, that'll be the perfect title for our next episode. I'm gonna have to borrow that, my friend.
You can certainly have it.
All right. Well, of course, final thoughts for me. I love the episode. I said it earlier. I'd say it again. Love it. It was absolutely fantastic. It was a reminder to me not only of the awesomeness of the Clone Wars, but the awesomeness of Star Wars animation as a whole. Seeing the clones battling the droids again. The clones battling the droids again. Carabas. Wow, I got myself tongue-tied there. Carabas. But yeah, seeing that was just so much fun. Like I've said multiple times, the lighting and the music was so moving through the episode and told its own story as it went on. It was just simply awesome. I was glad we got Crosshair. I was glad we got Cody. I loved it. So, as you know, Greg, we grade our episodes. We grade them. We just like if you would in school, you get an A, B, C, D, and or F. And I always say and or F, and I never understand why I say that and or, because you can't get an get an A and an F. It's
no, doesn't happen.
F. I always say and or. I don't know why. Carabas. Anyway, let's grade it and get your thoughts on the grade there. How would you grade this episode?
I would say on that scale, I think you've got to go A, only because I think the combination of the music, the animation, and the story, and especially with the Clone Wars callbacks and the powerhouse voices for this, and then of course you get Cody and you get Crosshair back. I think they really knocked this one out. I think this is going to be a show that will be measured against others, whereas I think those first two probably solid Bs, and that's no slouch. They were really good in setting the table. This one really upped it, and I really am excited to see what's happening next. But yeah, I got to go A.
Excellent, perfect. And I'm the same as you, my friend. To me, this is an easy A. I mean, this is about as easy an A as you can get. So it was as close to perfect as it could be, but it just wasn't A+ material yet, but it was close. I will admit this was close to an A+ for me, but I'm giving it an A. Because, there's always something that could have pushed it a little bit further. I don't know what it could have been. Honestly, I can't tell you there was always something that could have just made it just a little more, but it was, but it's an easy A. So, all right. Well, that wraps up our discussion on Solitary Clone. Awesome discussion. We want to hear what y'all think. Yes. Definitely let us know. You can actually reach out to the show on any of our social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter at SW Reactions Pod. We are on Instagram and Pinterest at SW Reactions. So reach out to us there. You can find all of our show notes now on our brand new Tumblr. Nice. Which is up and running. I failed to make that announcement last episode, but it's been up since our last episode. So it is up and running, and that is at SW Reactions as well. So you can find all the show notes along with all the links to everything we have right there. Now, Greg, if they want to reach out to you, talk to you about Star Wars, they want to look up Rebel Base Card, listen in, how would people go about finding you on social media and finding your show?
Oh, thank you. Just briefly, I just wanted to say congratulations on 100 episodes.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. You two are awesome together. And whenever you do get back together, it's always so much fun to listen to you. So just wanted to say a quick shout out. Congratulations.
Thank you.
As far as me, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Rebel Base Card. You can also look for the Rebel Base Card podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast. Because I use Anchor, most of the major platforms as well. I have been testing the waters of both TikTok and Hive. Same thing there, Rebel Base Card. And then if anybody needs to email the program, Greg at rebelbasecard.com. I'd be remiss if I didn't say we've been having fun with the breakfast shows. My co-host Gregory Cass and I, nice enough to come on, and we get to ask our questions. And like I said, we kind of like lean into shows like yours and others that kind of really get to break it down more. We just kind of sound like we know what we're doing just by asking questions, but it's all about getting that conversation going. And I love having all the people we've had on. It's just been really great to kind of reach out and get some help from the community. We got a great community.
Yes, we do. Star Wars community is absolutely fantastic. I love it. I know we were talking about it beforehand, before we started recording. The community in of itself is just incredible, and I love it because it's just the people. People are good. There are good people out there, and exactly. You when you meet them, you know it. And I have met so many incredibly awesome people in the Star Wars community that I gotta say it has been life changing. So many awesome people. So, and of course, David was not here again. So again, like I said, he is going through some stuff with his family, and we want to send our best wishes to David and his family. We love you, brother. Miss you. We're praying for you. Look forward to having you back whenever you can. If y'all do want to check up on him, just give him some space, but you can't. He is still on social media. He is at Twitter at no, that's our Twitter, not that's the show Twitter, not his. His Twitter is David_Modders on Twitter, or of course Instagram at David Modders. You can hit him up there. If you want to talk Star Wars with me, the best way to do that's Twitter at TA Harris 121079. That's the best way to do it. Or of course the show email swreactions@gmail.com. Hit us up there. Well, Greg, we end the show the same way every time.
I can't wait to hear this. So
you get to join me for this week's Star Wars Dad Joke of the Week. And it's a lame one.
I'm sitting down. I'm braced for this.
All right, here we go.
Give me your worst.
Here we go. Well, since we're talking Bad Batch, I had to find a Bad Batch centric joke for us this week. So why did Omega hate being the youngest clone on Kamino?
I'm going to regret saying this, but why did Omega hate being the youngest clone on Kamino?
Because all her genes were hand-me-downs.
Oh, oh, man, that's yeah. You just dadded yourself there. Oh my, that's pretty good.
Oh, I love it. I liked that one.
David, I took that one for you, man, buddy. I took a bullet for you. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it week after week.
I don't know how he does either. But there's more where that came from. So I'll have more for him when he gets back. So. All right. Nice. Well, Greg, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it, and look forward to having you back again in the future. Even when I know David will want you to come back when he's on, so he can laugh with you as well. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Y'all are the best. We appreciate each and every one of y'all. Be nice to somebody this week. Be kind. Change somebody's life for the better just with a smile. You never know what kind of day they're having, and a smile can turn it all around. So we love y'all. We're praying for you. Remember, this is your place for elegant discussion for a more civilized age.
If you'd like to share your thoughts, you can email us at show@starwarsreactions.com for our show notes and the latest news from the Star Wars universe. Visit our website at www.starwarsreactions.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at SWReactionsPod or on Facebook at Star Wars Reactions. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on iTunes. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or by Lucasfilm Limited. It's intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars. All names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and the respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Star Wars Reactions unless otherwise indicated. Star Wars Reactions. Elegant discussion for a more civilized age.